Well, hello, my name is Scott McLeod. I'm one of the founders of WineXRay, along with Dr. Johnny Colantuoni. But Clark Smith asked us to put our 2 cents in regarding the recent analysis that we ran on your behalf using the Della Toffola Maceration Enhancement technology. So give you an introduction about what we do, how we do it, and how this will help you interpret some of the numbers that we're going to show you. Just to give you an idea about when we talk about phenolic measurements, it's something that is really important to great red wine making, and analysis are really important to the understanding of that process. So as an overview, we use what's called the extended Harbertson-Adams assay, or Adams-Harbertson assay, created by UC Davis's Dr. Doug Adams and grad student Jim Harbertson, who's now on the staff at Washington State University. But we'll tell you a little bit about how we measure it, why, and how we do it, and why we do it. So macerations look familiar. Interesting thing about macerations is that whether it's coffee, tea, wine, beer, all of these are partial extractions, and you always have to keep that in mind. So whenever we deal with partial extractions, there's an element, amount that's finite. We're trying to get as much of it as we can, but we can never get all of it. Interesting, if you go back in history, it's one of these great things, Dr. Kennedy brought this out, but the fact remains that in all cases, the maximum of color was reached and its diminution began long before the fermentation was completed, but during the whole time, there was a steady increase in the tannin content. How's that for 1887? So it's pretty true. A couple of maceration interesting differences with 21-day, 28-day maceration, for example, plus a 4 or 5-day cold soak. Those aren't necessarily, we find exceptions to that rule. But red wine macerations, from the perspective of the winery, it's by far the most expensive part of your process and product cost of goods. In terms of quality and cost, are you getting the most of your fruit and getting the best out of your vineyards, getting the most out of your growers? And we can measure that. Always remember this, that when we look at red wine macerations, the partial nature of the extraction is critical. So we are lucky, a great maceration, we might get 50% of the anthocyanins that are available. Tannins, we don't want them all. So 5%, 40%, totally reasonable. But each variety and each consumer category does have reference standards that are, generally speaking, the quote norm of what is found in a commercial wine by variety. Total phenolics, this is the entire amount of material, how much we actually move in the wine, 20 to 50%. So we measure, this comes from the Harbertson-Adams assay, we measure our colored forms, our pigments, free total anthocyanins. Anthocyanins is a group. We're not measuring just malvidin triglycoside. The reason is there's 15 to 20 different anthocyanins in vinifera. And because of that, they have different ratios, different amounts. Varieties have higher in one than another. For example, Cabernet, very high in malvidin triglycoside. But the free anthocyanin is the available amount of color in your must at your wine pH. The total anthocyanin is pushed to a pH of 1.8, where all of the flavillum cation is lit up, and so it gives you a reference point about what has more color based on the same relative hemisphere. But total anthocyanins is a great value when you're looking at total amount of color. It's not at your wine pH, but it tells you what is in the matrix. Bound anthocyanins, these are our tannins that are bound to the anthocyanins, forming our stable color. But there are also textural qualities, which we all are very aware of. These textural qualities increase roundness, richness, plushness. That tannin, instead of binding to your salivary protein, now is bound to a tannin, but the compound still exists, giving you a sense of viscosity and roundness. Tannins, again, these are all plural, you notice that. We don't measure a single molecular quantity or weight. So because of that, there's a whole broad range of tannins, but the ones that we measure are the ones that react to our salivary protein. And this was really the key of the Harbertson-Adams assay, trying to tie the sensory laboratory of UC Davis, which was Ann Noble, Hildegard Heyman, with the chemistry side, the hard physical chemistry side, the Andy Waterhouse, the Dr. Roger Bolton, etc. Where was there common language between these two? And what they came up with was the sensory astringency and tannin reactivity to the salivary protein was critical in giving you the sensation of dryness or bitterness. So if we could use a tannin measurement that is Tannins that are precipitated with protein, those are most likely the proteins or the tannins that would react with our salivary protein, and hence the human experience with wine. Finally, the total iron reactive phenolics is a great measurement. This is all of the material inside the must that react with ferric chloride. The reason it's ferric chloride, it does not react with the colored forms of the pigments. So it's a separation. We get to see the colors from the non-colored forms. But the beauty of these is that the pigments are only found in the skin, obviously. The tannins are found both condensed in the skin as well as the seed. But the phenolics, the total phenolics, are found in the skin, seed, pulp, and pulp. The pulp being the phenolic acids, gallic acid, caphtoric acid, caffeic acid. So the total phenolics is a great measurement of total extraction. So it's a real key element when we look at the next slide. When we measure them, we did the wet chemistry, which was a very long process. Every time we did that, my partner Johnny would run the UV vis, and the ability to do that was with this equipment. On the far right, you have a centrifuge, then you have a sipper, which pushes the sample through the flow-through cell inside the spectrophotometer to the laptop. And this is how we do WineXRay. So our clients have this set up in their laboratories. They run the spectra files, upload them to our website. We return the results. I want to say thank you for letting us evaluate your wines from a phenolic perspective, and we appreciate it. And Clark, thank you for the intro.